Well, today I thought we would talk about the moon and its aspects, and my thinking here was it is is it a friend or is it a foe? And I think it's at times both. The moon in our chart um, is the moon here is associated with the feminine and nurturing principle. From the moment that we're born and we breathe in oxygen. We breathe in like the patterns of that moment, and it becomes the blueprint of our personality. The moon in our personality also has so much to do with our attitudes, how we respond to any given situation, and how I think of it. I think of it as what do we do? How do we respond and react to our initial environment in order to survive? And I know it sounds kind of like intense, it's like little babies we're trying to survive, but we really are. From the moment I think that we kind of exit that womb, however we do, we really begin our experience of other. So so as I said, the moon is associated with that feminine nurturing principle, and these patterns that we establish early on in our life essentially become imprinted in us and become sort of kind of set the pathways of how we carry on forward in our life and become part of our memory, our subconscious and our memory, which actually, I think, define our habits. Habits are difficult to break because they are subconscious or unconscious, and we immediately respond to any given situation instead of we actually, what I want to say is that we oftentimes just react to situations instead of respond to situations. And that moon and how our initial response to any given situation initially is our reaction, and hopefully with as we develop our awareness can become more of a response rather than a reaction, because a reaction oftentimes too is all about a trigger, and it can be immature, whereas a response can be more thoughtful. We pause, take a moment, and then choose um, how we can respond to that moment. Also, the moon in our chart represents it's our self-defense mechanisms. And here, as you see, I have this a, a, a little um, not a glyph, a little chain, a picture of a chain, because it's really about breaking chains. Our habits can enslave us, and this is how they become our foe, because we can also have habits that actually support our consciousness and who we are. As we know, the moon has no light of its own. It absorbs everything that is around it, and primarily the sun's past light. As such, it reflects our past. It reflects where we come from. A lot of times when you pick up books on what does the moon mean, it'll talk about family of origin, um, issues, and that I think is reflected. It is kind of how the moon is reflected in the past, our family, where we come from, um, our memory, our actually our familial memory, our memory that comes from our ancestral DNA. Wherever the moon is in our chart, it'll show the placement, the sign, it'll show how we express our feelings, how we actually nurture others, how we feel nurtured, and where we feel the greatest sense of belonging, safety, um, at home, within ourselves. And oftentimes this is all reflected in our external environment as well. As I said before, our immediate responses, reactions to any given situation is reflected by the moon. And of course, it's not just the moon sign, it has to do with its aspects, the house that it's placed in, And I also want to say that, the moon, and certainly in some schools of astrology, it's probably, the most significant factor. Different schools of astrology vary on what is most important. Um, I definitely, my observation and experience is that the moon is very important, along with our ascendant sun sign. But really, what's I think most significant is looking at the overall theme. Usually, as we'll see in some of the examples further down, um, is that there, whatever the moon house is, whatever the moon sign is, there's also going to be supporting themes that speak the same language, but in a different manner. Also, wherever the moon is in our horoscope, whatever house, area of life we find it in, we can see that this is a part of our life that we go through phases, just like the moon goes through phases in the sky, in the heavens. We too, in that particular part of our life, uh, we can with, become more aware how we go through phases in that arena. The moon also acts as a filter. Everything that we, experience emotionally, how we are touched, um, is the filter of the moon. And actually, I picked this photograph here. I couldn't help myself talking about filters and talking with a friend of mine. I live in Northern California, and we were part of that campfire. I know I'm digressing here a bit. And this was one of the pictures of the smoke in the air of that campfire. But I thought it exemplifies well that filter that the moon can also be in our life as we experience emotionally and we react emotionally to the circumstances in our life. That's going to be the sign is going to be that filter. The placement's going to be that filter.